one of the issues that we learned about dealing with cattle gates is that it seems that the manufacturers manufacture them in what would be regarded as a left-hand swing, which means that as you stand and you look at the gate, whatever side the hinges are on determines whether or not it's a left-hand or right-hand swing. And in this instance, what we realized after we'd already purchased the lock assembly and the wheel assembly is that when you install it, as we've installed it, with a right-hand swing, because we really didn't have a choice because that's where our 6x6 is that it ends up placing your carriage bolts with the nice, smooth, shiny side on the interior, which of course you really want them to be on the exterior. So since we really do need to just work with the hinges where they're located and operate the gate as a right-hand swing, it means that all we have to do, which isn't a big deal, is we're just going to go to the store and we're going to swap out the carriage bolts with your traditional hex grade 5 bolts, and so that way the fence section doesn't kind of kick out like that. To complete the fence, we're going to need to have a second section. This is one full section, which is about 6 feet wide. So we're going to bring in a second one, which is obviously going to be reduced a little bit. So we're going to do the process of how we're going to get one of these fence sections and cut it to the necessary width. And then in order to kind of solve the situation of having a seam right here, the idea that we've been playing with is using some 1x6s and sort of building them up or stacking them to create sort of a false post or a faux post that isn't intentionally meant to look like a real post, because of course you wouldn't have a post where you have a gate, but it at least will give the effect of having posts that look similar to the posts that are already on the fence, and it will cover the seam as well. We're back from the store and starting to begin the installation of the second fence panel that's going to, as well as we can, join up with the existing one. One of the considerations that we have when we start looking at it is that we definitely want to make sure that in the end that second fence panel is on the same plane as the first one, so they appear to be contiguous. Unfortunately, during the manufacturing processes, we noticed that the rail location that the fence manufacturer was using isn't always an exact location, so therefore we need to find something else we can use on this fence section to make sure that when we pull in our second one, they're going to stay together, lined up, and pretty. And so the idea that we have is, since you have a hollow chamber here right in the top, if we can put in there something that we can use to then hang the second fence panel on, that way we can ensure that our top rail is on the same plane as our second fence section. So let's show you how we're going to do that. One of the products that we like a lot is angle iron. We always have a bunch of it at the house, and one of the things we like about angle iron so much is the design of that angle means that it's pretty much always going to maintain a straight line. So therefore, in a situation like this where we want to maintain this straight line and keep both of these fence sections on the same plane, this seems like an ideal choice. And luckily, as we have it, it turns out it just does accidentally happen to fit inside really well. The difficulty is that you need to have a nut on one side and a bolt on the other. And as we go further down this chamber, we're not going to have much of an ability to be able to hold a nut in place. So therefore, we need another product that's going to be able to hold the angle iron up where it needs to be, and also allows it to act as a nut so that we can actually secure it and suck this angle iron up really nice and tightly so that the next section has a shelf to sit on. We've been in the middle of a PVC irrigation project recently, and so we had a bunch of PVC lying around. And as much as possible, we try to avoid making more trips to the store and try to figure out ways that we can use what's on the property already to solve a hack. And so this PVC pipe, this is a 1-inch diameter, turns out happens to be a really nice fit for getting right in there between that angle iron and the hollow chamber of the fence top rail. And also, because it's PVC, we can screw into that, and it's going to serve as a nut. So in the end, if we have that PVC pipe right here, it's going to get sucked up to the angle iron and to the top of that rail, because we're going to bolt right down through it, through the holes of the angle iron. We want to figure out where the middle of the angle iron is, so that we can make sure that we have half of the angle iron on the old section, half on the new. So if we go ahead and I pull some tape on this, its total width is 50 inches. So 25 inches is right here. So we'll just go ahead and mark that as the location for the center. And then what we're going to do, so I'm going to push that down to where center is. And then, since we're going to be running screws down through the angle iron into that PVC, we're not going to be able to see where the angle iron is, and we don't want to find ourselves trying to screw right into the angle iron and then ending up dimpling the plastic. So luckily, with the benefit now, we can just trace onto the top rail of the fence section all of the holes of the angle iron. So therefore, in the next step, when we go through and we screw into it, we'll know exactly where to screw. Now that we have the angle iron marked as a template on the top rail of the fence, we're just going to go ahead now and cut the PV section to the same length as the angle iron, because we don't need any more of the PVC in the fence section than matches the angle iron. So we're going to grab a PVC cutter and go and cut this right here. This is our handy dandy PVC cutter. It's pretty simple to operate. It's a ratcheted design, so all you really do is as you are cutting down, it's going to slide along those ratchets, so therefore you don't lose your bite on your pipe. And it doesn't take a whole lot of force. It's reasonably safe. Probably very minimal chance of actually injuring yourself. And you just kind of keep slowly walking through it as the teeth of the PVC cutter ratchet. You can hear that ratcheting sound. If it doesn't ratchet automatically, sometimes you might have to get your thumb or your finger there a little bit just to slide it down onto the next tooth. And eventually, pretty close now, we are through it. This is a section that we're going to use with the angle iron. So I've chosen some screws to run through the top rail and through the angle iron and into the PVC pipe. And the reason I've chosen this type of screw instead of a wood screw is, if you notice, the wood screw, it has a flare on it, and that's intentional so that it applies additional pressure to the wood as you're screwing through it. But these panhead style screws like this don't have a flare on it, and that's going to allow it to work with a washer. We want to use a washer because we don't want to dimple the plastic as we're driving down and trying to secure it. Whereas if we used just plain a wood screw, or if we used a wood screw with a washer, it would end up dimpling the plastic. And these are 1-inch screws. And so we're just gonna continue screw along this line and then bring in the second section of fence. We have all the screws now screwed in, but one thing I like to do that I wanted to share with y'all is that it's really easy when you're running a power drill or power screw gun to over drill something or over screw something. And so I always like to kind of go along afterwards and just sort of test it with my own hand and a traditional just manual screwdriver, just to make sure I don't over tighten them. And so now I'm just going through and just kind of checking the tightness and the pressure it's applying to the plastic with my own hand, just to make sure I am sucking that angle iron up really well, but also not accidentally dimpling the plastic. We measured the width that we need for the second section of fence panel and came up with 53.5, which is actually really cool because when we pull 53.5 from the other end, it turns out that that breaks exactly where their natural break of their fence panels are. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut probably around 55 inches and then just see if we can sort of break it apart and get these two sections out of here and then free up just the section we need for the 53.5. So before I saw this piece, I just want to kind of run through a little bit of circular saw safety that I've always been aware of. Kind of one of the first things I do is try to make sure that wherever I'm cutting, if I find myself in a situation where the saw kicks on me and my natural reflexes take over and try to get me out of the area, I try to make sure that there isn't anything behind me that's going to get me trapped. So instead of being able to get out of the way, the saw ends up kicking back up at me. And also, I have my hearing protection and I have my lovely scarf for the dust as well. And so with that, let's go cut this thing. We finished our cut using the circular saw and were able to successfully get the bulk of the fence section out of the way, and it turned out that luckily, as we hoped, that those fence panels just dropped right off. But what we did learn in that process is that the circular saw does a fine job on these rails because the PVC is a little thicker, but on the actual panels themselves, which are hollow and have that chamber inside, when the circular saw hits them, it really breaks it up. And since we do need to have a finished edge on the other side of the fence, we ran some experiments with a jigsaw, and using the jigsaw with a fine-tooth metal blade gives us a really nice cut right here that we're going to do next on that side of the fence panel. We've measured 53 inches from the left side of the fence panel. This is going to be the fence panel, the side that's adjacent to the hinges, and so that's why we've switched to using the jigsaw to get a nice, clean, pretty cut, because this side you will see, whereas the other side that we use the circular saw for will be covered with a faux post or a false post that we're going to create out of 1x6s.